Thank you everyone for joining me today. My name is Ryan Bradshaw. I'm one of the solutions architects at ReliaQuest, and today I'm going to give a presentation on how the rapid growth of security tools is increasing overall risk. Security as a team sport is a phrase that we use often at ReliaQuest. If you've ever worked with ReliaQuest in the past, I'm sure that you've heard us say this as well as seen it on numerous of our slides that we present. I find when I work with a new company, they generally fall within one of three categories. Either they are very mature, have their processes baked out, are constantly refining them and looking at what's next so they can stay ahead of any potential new threat vectors they may be vulnerable to. Then on the flip side, some are just building out their formal security program for the first time and they're splitting it off from the broader IT department. And then the vast majority fall in between these two. At ReliaQuest, our focus is on helping all organizations, regardless of their size and needs. We do that by making our efforts correspond with the clients. So we are acting as one team and not separate entities like some providers do. Currently, ReliaQuest operates out of 5 main locations. These locations include 3 SOCs, one out of Tampa, Florida, Las Vegas, Nevada, and then Dublin, Ireland is our third. And then we have 2 satellite offices, one in Salt Lake City, Utah, and another in London, England. We have over 200 customers with a 97% retention rating, and we're just over the 500 employee mark now and continue to grow and have over a 90% retention rating on our employees. A lot of that comes down to our culture, which is something else that you've probably heard of before if you've worked with ReliaQuest or if you had discussions with ReliaQuest in the past. We're really big on culture here, as well as our training. We consider ourselves essentially a training company, a training organization that also is focused primarily on security and driving positive outcomes for our clients. A little bit about myself before we get too far forward. I've been in this industry for about 5 years now. So I've done a lot of architecting, developments, and then implementation. So what that basically means is I'll go on site or have discussions with the client, basically to help them stand up a new solution. From there, help from the architecture phase as well as the development and actually implementation. And then once the implementation is done, then I'll turn that over to the operations team, which will then manage it moving forward. I've done this for lots of large organizations that would be a part of the Fortune 2000, as well as some small, medium-size type of environments. Previously, I have a military background, was in the U.S. Navy for about 7 years, a little over that. Previous NCOIC, as well as watch supervisor at multiple commands. Was lucky enough to get to do a decent bit of traveling while I was in the Navy. I was able to go to Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, specifically Dubai, as well as Turkey, Italy, France, Spain, to name a few. So diving right into it here, we see that too many tools, equals less visibility and control. And when we really start breaking this down, a large problem I see often is the inability to integrate products correctly. For example, I was helping a new customer onboard their antivirus solution. We get the logs in over a syslog protocol into their SIEM device. Get them in, get them parsing, and I'm looking at it like, oh, we're good to go. So start going through, starting to write the correlation rules based on that logs. And then I happened to notice on the main home screen, because we were doing a share screen as we were setting up the syslog to push out from the control manager. And I see that there's 12,700 agents that are showing to be deployed. That's a large number. But I'd previously had a conversation when we were doing some scoping, and this client had mentioned to me that they had around 22,000 endpoints. So I asked why there was a discrepancy, and we're only seeing the 12,700 agents deployed. And then that's when they let me know that they were planning on rolling out the rest in a phased approach over the course of the next year. So they had ran into some deployment issues, which can happen, and that's why they were looking to, stagger it out So they didn't have any downtime because they had a few issues with deploying the agents causing some downtime on some of the endpoints. So I get that. But something to keep in mind here is this means that rules that are leveraged in the antivirus log source that we just integrated, it's only got about login for about 42% of their endpoints, of their total number of endpoints. So that means that the other 58%, if something were to happen there, there's no antivirus that's installed, right? So obviously we're going to have that visibility gap, as well as that potential containment and remediation that the antivirus could provide us from a protection perspective. So that's something to keep in mind is we're talking about 9,300 endpoints. So even in a large-scale organization like this, that's a huge gap. Think about how would you be able to sleep at night knowing that your AV solution is only deployed on less than half of your endpoints. It's a serious visibility gap, right? Another scenario I see a lot is poorly tuned tools. Sometimes it's just incorrect login levels being sent. Not usually too bad of a fix. Go in, change it from informational to error, or sometimes I'll see that it'll just be way too verbose. Maybe there was some initial troubleshooting that was going on when the tool was being installed, but they forgot to change the login level, so it's spitting out debug login level, which is just way too verbose, and it's going to take up extra space, and whatever tool is going to be used to retain those logs for a long period of time. So I see the login level, and then the next thing is I go through and I look and I see that we don't have all the correct fields, which means that the use cases that I'm building may not be able to trigger because we're not seeing all the correct field sets. Another issue is I'll see a lot of times there'll be Intel feeds, and these Intel feeds will not be configured, which means that these threat signatures are not being updated in these tools. So if we're talking about IDS, IPS, or antiviruses, or an EDR solution, for example, they have a lot of times, great threat intelligence tools that are baked into those that come a part of the subscription. But if they're not configured right, then you're not going to bring it in. And a lot of times, those misconfigurations are something as simple as an expired password or just simply a URL change. And just making that simple change can go through and obviously add additional context to the login that you're performing. With all of this, we're talking about leads, to a decrease in threat detection and response, unfortunately. How much are existing security technologies being used? This is another large piece. And it can be tough to quantify, because a lot of times we say, yep, I have my firewall set up, running, for example, but what does that really mean? We find that 13% are being used as they were intended to. Then about 14% of those are being used to their full potential. For example, I'll use firewalls again as an example here. Maybe you have them set up to manage your network traffic, but have additional features that are built into your next-gen firewall that you aren't using, but you're paying for those subscriptions, such as IDS IPS capability or threat intelligence like I was talking about before. But you're paying for these, but they're not configured. So it's basically wasted spending for all intents and purposes at that point. And then that kind of leads into the next piece, which is what we would consider would be, the most wasteful, right? We see about 15% of security tools are being used and not being used at any capacity. I mean, you talk about the largest waste of money. So what I see a lot of times here is going back to the next-gen firewall example. We'll say that you have a next-gen firewall. It has the ability to be your firewall. It has the ability to handle your VPN, so you got all your network session traffic going through it. It also has the ability to be your IDS IPS, but then you also own an additional IDS IPS solution. Well, that additional IDS IPS solution, what's the purpose in that? Why are you going to continuously spend money to upkeep that and to have support on that product if you're not going to need it? Because it's really just duplicating efforts, right? When you have these type of situations, this is the kind of stuff that really makes it tough to justify that next purchase. And it makes it tough for the CFO to really, or whoever your bottom liner is when it comes to a signature perspective, to really give out those discretionary funds when other tools that have been bought in the past are basically just wasted spend. Now moving on to visibility gap, right? So with an average of 30 to 50 different security tools in each environment, it's hard to establish a standard SOP of how you need to integrate these log sources into all your different platforms from a correlation perspective or even from a playbook for alert triage. A lot of times there are multiple vendors in every environment, which makes the task even more daunting. You know, and finally, it's rare that one team, especially the security team for some reason, owns all the security tools. So you must play politics because you're probably going to be working with other, basically, you're going to be working with some other teams that have a vested interest, particularly in that tool, but you need that tool in order to deliver the specific outcome that you're promising your organization, right? So it could really make it challenging because you really have to play the political battle, especially if you want to get these tools updated or maybe you want to rip and replace. Well, if you want to rip and replace and it's being managed by another team, that can be a pretty daunting task in and of itself because you got to play the political battle to get them on board to help justify ripping and replacing for another security tool. Those issues cause a lack of visibility in most environments and make it difficult to justify the new spend for more tools. And the difficulty to get these tools integrated can cause them to be forgotten and not used in some cases. The domino effect of these challenges we discussed are security tools becoming shelfware. Usually, when this is the case, I hear things like, yep, we have that, it's turned on, but we really aren't doing anything with it. Or, yep, we have that, but it's not something that we've used in a long time. It's not something that's currently patched. Or in some cases, I hear, yes, technically we have that in our inventory of security tools, but it's not turned on. Or there's no logging going to it, so it can't provide any value. So that kind of brings us into the operational efficiency piece, right? So now that we've talked about some of the pitfalls and challenges, let's discuss a few things you can do to optimize your organization's operational efficiency. Don't be pigeonholed to one cloud environment because of the tool that you buy. That's a big one. Make sure that the tools that you buy can operate with at least the big three cloud environments that are out there, right? We all know the big three, and that's something big that I see with a lot. We'll see that there'll be large companies that will pigeonhole themselves where some of their security tools will only work with one specific vendor. And we all know that there's a huge migration or shift to the cloud, or at least to go to like a hybrid cloud type environment. So you don't want to pigeonhole yourself and make it more difficult on yourself to accomplish. Make sure that you are going to use all the features that you're paying for. So I kind of talked about this before, right, with the next-gen firewall. So if you already have an external, or I'm sorry, not external, but you already have another appliance that's providing an IDS IPS functionality, don't pay for that on your next-gen firewall unless you're looking to transition. If that other IDS IPS tool that's in your environment is going to become legacy and you're going to phase that out, then that's fine. A lot of times when you get into next-gen firewalls or even I'll say larger OEMs that specialize in the security space that have a broad range of tools, a lot of times you can get some deep discounts by adding in additional functionalities to tool sets. So that could be really good if you're trying to meet a particular budget. A lot of times you can get a really good discount on those additional feature sets. But make sure that what you're agreeing to and that you're going to put your money into, make sure that you're going to use that. Lastly, make sure you budget for the reoccurring support and maintenance of the tool. I see this time and time again where I go in, the tool's about 5, maybe 7 years old, hasn't been really updated for 2 years. And what it boils down to is the customer was afraid to upgrade it because they, A, didn't have support with it, or sometimes B, sometimes that's behind a paywall, right? Not all vendors out there basically will even allow you to get patches or upgrade packages for your appliances if you don't actually have a current subscription. So sometimes that paywall gets in the way, or sometimes it's just the fear factor. It's if something goes bad, I don't have anyone I can call. And I know that there are some MSSPs or MSPs out there that won't even touch these technologies if you don't have a current subscription. So that's something else to keep in mind. The next part of operational efficiency, getting buy-in from leadership is extremely important. And it is a lot easier assuming they haven't been burned in the past. So when I say burned in the past, I'm kind of going back to like I talked about before with wasted spending, right? In general, if you keep your company out of the news for bad press, pass your audits and compliance checks, it's a lot easier to get buy-in my experience. Prioritizing is very important. So when the discretionary funds come available, you already know what the most important items are that you need. Because we all know that when spending is available, it's a team sport. Just like I mentioned security is earlier, everyone wants a piece of the funding. It's very rare that a company has all the resources and knowledge required to rapidly deploy new technologies correctly and efficiently. So don't forget to negotiate professional services when you're purchasing, as it's usually a good time to get a deep discount on those services. And those services can help you rapidly deploy those new security tools in your environment and get those integrated optimally and efficiently. Next, go to your prioritization plan and start to make a diagram of how the new tools are going to integrate with your existing security stack. Bring in consultants to make sure all the integrations you are planning will be compatible. It's always good to get an expert set of eyes, or even just a second or third set of eyes, and then take in their recommendations, right? This will help validate what you're proposing. So that way, when you're putting together this proposal and you're giving that to your leadership, you can say that you consulted with XYZ company and they provided these recommendations which you've added into your architecture or into your workflow diagram. And that way you're accounting for that. So they know that you've done your research. They know that you've done your research to make sure that this is going to work for the organization, not just today, but 5, 6, 7 years down the road. Next, we see a lot of teams struggle to maximize tool return on investment. A lot of times because of the poor integrations, or sometimes it'll just because of not being compatible with other tools in the stack, or even from training gaps. Training is another piece, kind of going back to the professional services piece. When you're going through and you're making that commit and you're committing that purchase, that's a great time to basically try to add in or ask them to add in some training, because free training, a lot of times, if you can get that added in or at least discounted training, you can go through and actually have that so that as you have new personnel come on board, as your either environment grows or we'll just say your team grows, you're able to recycle and use that training to help your new team members get up to speed faster. And also, this is where having the prioritized plan is really helpful too, right? That way, even if there have been personnel changes, like I was saying, if you have your plan, you could still articulate to the new leadership where their priorities should be. You can help drive that conversation because you've already done your work. You've already done your homework. You've done consultation, with several companies to make sure you got some second and third opinions in there. So you can present to your new leadership team and you can, be known that you have a comprehensive plan put together because all that research that you did is going to, prove fruitful for them and for your organization. We do have some solutions, we have to help our customers with as well. And we have seen great success, Here's a few going over. These include hiring and training SMEs. So SMEs being subject matter experts. Part of ReliaQuest, what we actually provide is we provide free training for all of our customers for all the different technologies that we support. But creating an internal architecture position is another great idea. Sometimes it's best for this individual or this team, if you're talking about large scale, to actually sit off by themselves and they can report. I've seen them report directly to CIOs before, or maybe directly to a CISO, and that can work out really well because they don't have to worry about playing the political battles because they kind of sit off by themselves. So I definitely like that structure, and when I've seen that in the past, I've seen that work out really well. This allows, the project plans that we discussed earlier, to have a primary owner, or it could be owned by a team who's responsible for keeping these current and keep driving those initiatives. Another big one is roadmaps. Roadmaps are a great way to gauge if the tool's long-term trajectory meets your enterprise's demands. Also, from the budgeting perspective, reviewing the CapEx and OpEx spend, will allow your organization to decide which direction the funds should be allocated for these particular projects. Next, don't feel like you must centrally store all your data in a single location. If the source tool only provides 30 days worth of logging and you need it for compliance and a longer retention period, then yes, send the data to a data lake, cheap cloud solution, or if it can be used from a correlation perspective, send it to your SIEM solution, right? Invest in solutions that integrate their security controls in multiple cloud environments. I talked about that earlier, but I just want to hit that on again because I see that a lot. If outsourcing the management of your tools is the best option for you, then just make sure that the provider that you select can handle managing your full security stack. Make sure they can grow with you and they're not going to become a burden on your program. To achieve what we've discussed today, I recommend performing an annual inventory which consists of a deep dive assessments of all the tools in the security stack. Then you can identify if you have any duplicate tools or functions that can be eliminated, like the duplicate IDS IPS we discussed earlier, for example. Ensure you're optimizing your tools that you have in place today and mapping to a framework. Next, ensure you're tracking the capabilities of your security team as they often change over time. And then work to create a holistic security program by connecting existing data silos to increase your visibility. And then overall, with our new approach, and finally, we're continuously measuring programs efficiencies. I mean, that's a big thing that we do at ReliaQuest, and it's something that I recommend for all of you to do. You want to continuously measure your program's efficiency so that way you can actually provide those metrics to leadership. It really is another good piece that really helps when it comes to the operational spend. And that way, as new goals are identified, it's also important to make sure that you've updated the security team plans to account for all those. And then that also helps you keep on top of all the cost that would be associated with those, right? Because we've already got the plan together. You're effectively measuring your program's efficiency. When you tie all that together, it really does provide a really nice holistic picture of where your program's at today, any gaps that you may have, how you're going to close those, and with whom you're going to actually use to actually close those gaps. And then it also helps you identify any training pieces that you may need for that. And with that, that brings me to the end of the discussion today. I hope you've enjoyed this session. And next year, I hope I can be there in person to meet all of you and discuss this topic and more in person. Please stay safe out there. It's been a crazy year in 2020. So please stay safe out there. And thanks again for watching my session.